Is it visible?
Yes,
Hello.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So generally, in a qualitative research, we mostly depend on ethnographic research. Some of the students or some of the researchers who are mostly doing the qualitative research are most of the time got engaged in doing ethnographic research. Suppose they used to go to the particular area, particular village or particular region or particular location and stay there for a continuous longer periods and try to grasp the information on a particular issue. And sometimes whenever we start writing a village ethnography, we also covers the most of the we usually try to cover the most of the aspects from the of a particular village from a different perspective. So there we have to know what exactly the ethnographic research and how to do ethnographic research and what is exactly the history of this ethnographic research. All these things need certain kind of importance for us. See, specifically in qualitative research, we use this ethnographic research methodology. So we'll look into that. What exactly the qualitative research and what is the importance of ethnographic research or ethnographic methodology usually we use in the context of qualitative research. If you look into qualitative research, it lays emphasis on the qualities of entities and process. It is completely whatever the information we are collecting, it is always trying to emphasize on entities and process of different aspects. What is happening? Its process of evolution, its process of happening, its process of day-to-day activities, and the different entities involved in the total process. It lays stress on the socially constructed nature of reality, the intimate relationship between the research and the researched, and the situational constant that shape the inquiry. See, in qualitative research, generally, we always give emphasis on socially constructed nature of reality, because you see, sometimes what happened, I was telling about that. If you look at this Varna and caste, generally Varna is called a textual context, because the terminology Varna you will find only in the text. But if you go to the caste, you will find that it is an ethnographic reality. So that means in qualitative research, generally, we look into the reality that is socially constructed nature of reality. I mean, what exactly found in the field? What is the reality? What is socially constructed in the field? Means if you look into the, suppose take any kind of particular issues, and in qualitative research we try to explore what is and how it is the intimate relationship between the research and the researched, and the situational constant that shape the inquiry. What are the situational constants are there? What is the relationship between research and research are there? We always try to explore that. It is an empirical inquiry that entails the purposive sampling for gathering the data. In qualitative research, mostly we take the purposive sampling and we try to inquire the information from the very empirical field. In qualitative research, open-ended interviews, observation in field, artifact studies are some of the methods we adopted in qualitative. I have already told you, I am not getting into the details right now because I have already told you in qualitative research. Because whenever we discuss about the ethnographic research, we must need have a clear-cut information about the qualitative research, then how ethnographic research helps in giving more information, more in-depth information, and also helps in more in-depth analysis in the qualitative research. It deals with the subjective assessment of attitudes, opinions, behavior of respondent in the field. You see, generally in quantitative research, whenever we collect the people's attitude, opinion, behavior, mostly what we do, we used to collect it in a quantitative way, with different scale. On different scale, we collect and then we made a quantification. But generally in qualitative research, we do a subjective assessment of attitudes, opinions, and behavior. Suppose somebody gave an opinion, somebody has a different kind of attitude, somebody has a different kind of behaviors. What we do, we subjectively assess all these things. We not quantify this. The results are generated either in a non-quantitative form or in form which are subject to relatively less rigor in quantitative treatment. What I am telling, generally in qualitative research, we collect all this information in a non-quantitative, means we always looks the people's, not to give in a scaling way, rather to give their opinion, attitudes and behavioral responses in a very descriptive way. So they can mention what is their opinion instead of mentioning them in a scaling. I agree, disagree, not agree, very much agree, like that. I can ask their opinion and write it in a very descriptive way, and which I can use in a qualitative analysis. Various techniques like group discussion, we used to do FGD, focused group discussion, projective techniques, then in-depth interview, key-informant interview. Whenever we go to the field, we used to identify, I'll teach you the later on what is key-informant interviews. We used to identify some of the person who will be useful to you throughout your research in the field. So that is, those are called key informer, and we look into have an in-depth interview with the key informants. Then role play, generally sometimes we do some small kind of street play, role play. Through that we can mobilize the people, we can get more information, and we can collect the information from the field. Data typically in the form of words or pictures. Generally, either data in a very pictorial way, or they in a verbal or in non-verbal communications also, and also in a verbal way we typed it in a word form and collect. Qualitative research develops sorts of theories. It describes the meaning or discovery. The research is explicitly a part of the data gathering process. The qualitative research is explicitly a part of data gathering process. We collect lots of information, lots of data, and through this, it uses communication and observation. The qualitative research, what it did, it uses communication and observation. We communicate with others and observe the data. And while we are interacting in qualitative research, while we are interacting with some of the people, while we are communicating with some of the people, we observe. See, sometimes what happens, somebody is giving some information to you, but if you observe them, you can understand what exactly his intention, whether he or she is telling lie, whether he or she is really interested to share this information with you or not, whether she has some afraidness or he has some afraidness while sharing the information. So all these things, while communicating, if you observe, you can look into somebody's, that is means facial expression, that is gesture you can observe, which will help you in analyzing the data. Means in qualitative research, along with the communication, the observation plays a very important role. It uses data collection methods like participant observation, semi-structured interview, all these things will use in a qualitative research. Question and answer are exchanged in a two-way communication between researcher and respondent. Questions are open, loosely specified, possible answers. I can either we can open-ended or loosely. I have already told you questionnaire. Either it may be open-ended or we can mention a checklist, interview guide. We can use. Respondents are selected based on information maximization, and every respondent may be unique. So what exactly doing? So while we are selecting also the respondents, that is samples, and all, we use certain kind of guidelines. I'll teach you later on the sampling and all. So we use certain kind of methods while collecting the information. There are broadly three theoretical and methodological perspectives in qualitative research. First is ethnographic perspective, phenomenological perspective, and ethnomethodological perspective. We'll use all these things later on. So what is phenomenological perspective, what is ethnomethodological perspective, we'll discuss later on. And generally we use this theoretical and methodological perspective in qualitative research. One is ethnographic perspective, one is phenomenological perspective, another is ethnomethodological perspective. So all this perspective has a different meanings and different use, different mechanism of use. We'll discuss this phenomenological perspective and ethnomethodological perspective little later. Today we'll discuss about ethnographic perspective. Got my point till now? See, while in the qualitative research, usually we use these three theoretical and methodological perspective. When that is ethnographic perspective, phenomenological perspective, and ethnomethodological So these are very important three perspectives we use in the qualitative research. We'll discuss about the phenomenological and ethnomethodological perspective later on. Today we are going to discuss about ethnographic perspective. So you look into this. See, ethnographic perspective. Ethnography is concerned with the study of a particular culture and relies on a participant observation. You see, what we are doing in ethnographic research? We are focusing on a particular culture. We are not focusing here and there. We are not focusing the culture of different communities. We are focusing on a culture of a particular community, on a particular culture, and relies on participant observation. On what we are relying participant observation, where the researcher immerses himself or herself in the customs and lives of the sample population under exploration and notes his or her observation is extensive field notes. What we are doing? We are doing extensive field work. We are depending on extensive field notes, and we are depending on somebody's experience. Then we are involving on participant observations, and also notes of whenever I am interacting with somebody, I am writing a field notes. We are also depending on these field notes while we are writing an ethnographic report. Ethnography is a particular research approach as opposed to being a particular method of research. So what exactly whenever we are telling ethnography perspective or ethnography, it is a research approach. It is not a particular method of research. Generally, you see, people used to be confused. They used to tell that ethnography is a method. No, ethnography is not a method. It is an approach. It is an approach. It is a family of approach which includes the different methods, because here we are using intro methods, here we are using observation methods. So if I am doing an ethnographic research, it is an approach. Means what I told, whether my research sometimes in a qualitative research, I mostly do also sometimes ethnographic study. In ethnographic study, by approaching ethnographic approach, where I am including the different methods, that is observation method, case study methods, then interview also I am using. So what I am telling, it is not a particular method, rather it should be considered as a research approach. An ethnographic study can use several different methods depending on the aim of the research. So what I am already told you, means ethnographic study, what we do, we use the different methods depending on the aim of your research. What is the aim of your research? Based on that, you are identifying the different methods. So based on that, you will continue your study. The underlying elements of ethnography are the specificity of its study of a particular culture, subculture, population, and the use of observation is in amassing field and contextual notes pertaining to that culture, subculture, or population. You see, what we are doing here, the underlying element of ethnography are the specificity of its study of a particular culture. It means this is the underlying intention of an ethnographic study. What we are doing, we are exploring the specific, exploring the specific aspect of a particular culture or a subculture or a particular population, and the use of observation is matching field and contextual note pertaining to that particular to that culture and subculture of a population. Means whatever we are trying to observe in the field, and everything we are trying to observe in relation to that particular location, in relation to that particular universe where I am making the study, whose culture and subculture I am trying to explore. I am targeting on that. Ethnography has its origin in anthropology, with the initial aim being to study the exotic and unfamiliar cultures. Means something which is not explored, which is not familiar, which is very much exotic in nature. So all these aspects generally anthropologists use in ethnographic research to explore. Means there are certain kind of issues which is unexplored by the people, which are very unfamiliar cultures are there, where even the other outsiders, they are not much aware about that. The anthropologists, while doing the ethnographic research, they try to explore all this information in a very uniform way and in a very extensive way, in a very intensive way. So that is for that purpose they used this ethnographic approach. Ethnographic research takes place in the natural setting of the everyday activities of the subject under investigation. What they do, it takes place in the natural setting of the everyday activities of the subjects under investigation. So what generally we have, what generally we do? We do in ethnographic research. Generally, what we do? It is in any kind of natural setting of the everyday activities. So in a, means while we are doing an ethnographic research in a particular natural setting, in a particular location, on a particular population, what we are doing, we are observing, we are noting out the everyday activities of the subjects under investigation. Means what I am doing here specifically, look at doing in ethnographic research, what generally we are doing, we are not only interacting with the peoples with a stipulated questionnaire, rather we are also observing the everyday activities, what exactly the villagers are doing, on whom I am targeting. These are my samples, these are my population, or this is the village study which I am doing. My target is since the morning till the people go to the bed at night, what activities they are engaged, what exactly they are doing every day, to whom they are interacting, what are the festivals they are celebrating, what are the other, what kind of relation they are maintaining with the neighbors, what kind of relation they are trying to maintain with within the family, what are the general activities they are doing since morning to the evening, and how they are spending time in the field. While spending the time in the field, how they are establishing the relationship with the different stakeholders, might be the other laborers and the other persons, other neighbors if there are the kin relatives. So all these things in ethnographic research we are trying to observe from morning to evening. So here the inquiry from the inside assumes that the researcher can best come to know the reality of an organization by being there, by becoming immersed in the stream of events and activities, by becoming part of phenomena they study. What exactly here? When the researcher always feels himself or herself that I am an insider. So means while I am doing an ethnographic research, here I am inquiring from the insides that the what exactly the reality is happening in the field, and I try to collect as much as information related to different events and activities, becoming a part of this community. Because unless and until I become a part of that community, I cannot go more in depth. I cannot go to the inside and collect the as much as information. Ethnography in practice has evolved from the classic approach where it was assumed the researcher could retain the objectivity when exploring the new culture. Means the here in ethnographic research we assume that the researcher, even though involved in the field, he is trying to maintain the objectivity by exploring the new culture to reflexive ethnography. So means uh, they are trying what exactly the people's having the view perception. Uh, so where the role and background of the research is included as an integral element of the ethnographic undertaking. So means the researcher's background, the researcher's knowledge also very much important on a particular subject, because unless and until the researchers having strong background on that particular subject and particular ideas is missing, then it is very difficult to have an ethnographic research. The ethnographer tries to obtain the cultural knowledge of the natives, yeah, cultural knowledge of the natives, and this knowledge is never made fully explicit. What I am telling, while we are doing the ethnographic research, the ethnographer, means the researcher, tries to obtain the cultural knowledge of the natives. What exactly the different knowledge the natives are having? What are the indigenous knowledge they have? What are the cultural knowledge they have? Relating to the different aspect, relating to the health management, relating to the resource management, relating to the agricultural management. What are the indigenous knowledge? What are the cultural knowledge they have? What are the local knowledge they have? The natives are having, which they can use in preserving, conserving their livelihood, their resources, their health, their human resources. So all these things are highly important for an ethnographer. The non-explicit aspect of cultural knowledge can often be inferred from a casual remarks that must then be classified by more systematic questioning. You see what exactly we are doing here. We are collecting more casual remarks from the peoples. We are trying to, in a very explicit way, we are trying to collect the cultural knowledge of the people. The natives, by definition, do not engage in a systematic question of knowledge. Here, what the natives are doing, they are, even though we are asking the question in a very systematic way, but we are trying to collect the information in a very qualitative way, in a very descriptive manner. The more accidental and unsystematic question creates variation from the individual to individual. So you see, what exactly we are doing? The more accidental and unsystematic question creates variation from individual to individual. See, suppose what exactly happens, I can keep some kind of checklist in my brain, and instead of going with a very structured questionnaire and asking everybody one by one, I can meet the peoples in a different segments in a different place and interact with the peoples, and then what will you find? You will find there are different kind of variation will come, and from that variation you will try to explore what exactly the uniformity in the answers. However, the ethnographer must transit the accidental and replace it with the control and systematic data illuminating the intercultural uniformity and variation of cultural knowledge. Because whenever the ethnographer meets very accidental way, he try to collect the different information from a very variation way from different aspects. The activities of systematically trying to understand the knowledge of others from interviews and observation while trying to into day-to-day role in the culture under study is known among the ethnographers and sociologists and participant observers. Means here what I'm doing, we are looking into the very day-to-day activities in a very systematic way also. Because unless and until we look at the things in a very systematic way, it will be very difficult to extract the very in-depth information. Participant observation is ultimately a personal art that must be learned by doing, by introspection, and by reading. You see, what exactly doing? See, it is doing that, even though you claim that you are an ethnographer, but doing, adopting the participant observation, it is ultimately a personal art. How an individual is using this participant observation, because sometimes you are asking me that sir, some information we are not able to collect, because you see what I'm telling, you look into observation, use the participant observation as a mechanism, as a method of data collection. And again, it is telling that even though you are adopting this participant observation as a method of data collection, but it is completely a personal art, that everybody cannot use this participant observation. Everybody cannot mingle with the community. Everybody cannot take the advantage of participant observation. It is completely a personal art. How you are able to mingle with the community, how you are interacting with the community. There are some peoples by nature are not so communicative, are not so mixing. It will be very difficult in their part to use this participant observation and collect the information, because it is completely in personal art. How you are utilizing this participant observation while collecting the information from the field by introspection and by reading. Means what exactly, while you are interacting with the peoples, how you are introspecting the information given by the person, and how you are reading the minds of the peoples. The fact that it is an art does not preclude the use of rigorous techniques or the craft that the science encourages. It is in completely an art. It is not a kind of that. It is something which is science use, or it is not a very kind of rigorous activities which you have to use it very scientific way. It is completely an art of how you are using. You see, artistic status implies only that the art must be perfected before scientific analysis can be performed. Artistic mastery is never devoid of the mastery of techniques. So means while we are doing this kind of research, you should be very much careful that what approach you are using. So you see, what I'm telling here, that in ethnographic research, what we are doing, ethnography is a holistic approach to the study of cultural system. See, I have told you from the very beginning, ethnography is a holistic approach. It is not a kind of, you are not going through ethnography, you are only exploring a particular information of a village, of an area, of a locality, of a population. What you are doing, you are going for a holistic information. You are, I told you now, you are not, if you are doing an ethnographic research, you are, whenever you are studying any particular issue, you, what in the context of ethnographic research, you have to collect the information from all aspects, because the study is completely holistic in nature. Because unless and until you collect the information from a different perspective, you cannot give justice to your ethnographic research. Because once you collect the information from various segments, from various aspects, then only you can link into the data which you are intending to collect, so that it will be a very systematic way and a very holistic way you can collect the information. It is study of socio-cultural context, process, and meanings within cultural system. Means you need more socio-cultural context, you need more process information, you need more logical outputs. It is the study of cultural system from both emic to ethical perspective. I'll teach you later on what is emic and ethic perspective. Means emic means the insider, ethic means an outsider. Suppose what is emic, insider and outsider? I'll teach you in the later on what the difference and what is the similarity between this emic and ethic perspective. Here, the insider in the sense, if you are studying your own community, if you are studying on your own villages, suppose see here, suppose I belongs to the communities of Brahmins, and if I make a study on Brahmin communities, that will be an emic approach for me. And if I'm doing the study on other castes, that will be ethic perspective for me. Suppose I belongs to a particular district, particular village, and if suppose now I'll go to my village, and after this pandemic and all, I look into how my villagers are coping and all. So there, if you're making a study in my own village, that will be an emic approach for me. And if I go to your village and make a study on that, that will be ethic perspective for me. I'll tell you in details later, because these are very crucial methods we usually use in very in qualitative research in emic and ethic. And there are lots of debate is continuing the problems of studying one's own society. What problems we face whenever we study our own society. It is a process of discovery, making the inferences, and continuing inquiries in an attempt to achieve the emic validity. Whenever we collect any kind of information and we try to discover and making inferences and continuing the inquiries, means while we are doing more inquiries, we try to explore more and more information and try to validate the data which I collect. Because sometimes what happens now, we always tell that, because from the very beginning I was telling you that validation of data is reliability, and validation of data is highly essential also. It is an interactive process of learning episodes. It is means we try to learn so many aspects and so many things. Ethnography is an open-ended, emergent learning process and not a rigid investigator controlled experiment. You see, in ethnography, we mostly use open-ended questionnaire, and we mostly do open-ended process of interaction. We never go with a very rigid kind of investigation with a controlled experiment. It is a highly flexible and creative process. Ethnography is a highly flexible and creative process. Because generally, whenever we go for any kind of ethnographic research, we never go with a rigid questionnaire, which cannot be, you cannot manipulate it, you cannot you dislocate it and use it. We go with a more highly flexible mechanism with a very creative process. You can have an interaction, you can organize different events in the field, role play and all kind of events you can organize in the field and extract more and more information. It is an introspective, reflexive, and constructive process, and it requires the daily and continuous recording of field notes. In ethnographic research, you have to write the field notes every day. That's why I told you from the very beginning that while we are doing an ethnographic research, we always use field notes. I always tell my students go for field notes because field notes helps a lot. Because if you write the field notes, you can see means while we write something in the field notes, something we can remember, and that field notes you can use in your later on life. You see, I'll tell you when I did my MPhil and PhD maybe around 20 years back, my field work whenever I did in the RF. So around 20 years back, but still I have that field notes. And if I want to write something, if I want to revisit those areas, so because whenever now also my MPhil area, whenever I cross the whenever I go home and I cross that area from the little distance, the roadside from roadside, whenever I cross that area, I always feel very happy, and I share my experience with my children that this is the area where I did my study and I was having a kind of different kind of experience in that. So, but still I have those field notes with me. So whenever I feel sometimes to read those field notes, it also gives me lots of happiness, and from that I can explore lots of information from the field, because whenever we are writing the field notes, we are writing so many aspects in the field notes. So that's why the field notes matters a lot. That's why I told always my students, even if you are doing nothing in the field today, and if you are simply sleeping at your room also, you please write down that today I completely took rest, I enjoyed my field. So that means, see, you're relaxing, your relaxation has given you lots of opportunity to rethink the villages. It is not that you are only sleeping, but rather you are relaxing yourself. That means you are thinking, and means you are rethinking what the data you have collected. So I'll I'll stop here, because what I'm telling, otherwise it will be heavily burden to you, because if I'll tell so many things, you may not grasp it. So any question on this till now?
Hello, sir.
Ah,
Iterative process means
sorry.
there is a sentence that ethnography is a iterative process.
Ah.
So, what is mean by iterative process?
I didn't get you what exactly it is. It is which slide? It is you are asking ethic or
In this slide, sir, last line, it is an iterative process of learning.
interactive process of learning episode. See, interactive means it is a kind of means here generally we are going in a more kind of discussion modes. So more interactive mode, more descriptive mode, and involving ourselves in a very in a specifically when we interact with somebody and get more and more in-depth information, that is called interactive process actually.
Okay, sir.
Because if you say, if somebody generally will continue with the qualitative ethnographic research, this is highly essential, because unless and until you are having a much more understanding on this, you will be not able to do. And specifically, uh, uh, see, my entire research methodology I am involving is a kind of more, it is taking specifically from very uh, including the different levels, means starting from post graduation to the PhD and thereafter, because through that usually also I use the slides also for every time I'm updating those slides, because I use these slides also for other training program now. So that's what I'm telling. So if you have any kind of doubts, please ask, because I'm going for more in-depth description. which will help all the students, because there are so many PhD students also there. And any question? Hmm?